So you want to stain your floors? Well, you best watch this video because I'm going to go through the most random things that you would never think of that could affect your finished product. And this is part 3 of my refinishing floor series of using rental equipment. And the rental equipment is the key here. Woo! It's a good one. All right, let's get into her.
Five minutes later.
Without thinking about how I know how wood reacts to stain, because I was scared. I was fighting this problem that I didn't quite understand. And so I sanded this thing down to the nth degree, and I made it too smooth. And when you do that, the stain, you only get a smaller portion of stain. And I want this floor to be darker than it is. We're gonna regrind it again and take out all these little swirls that happened during the palm sanding section. So, and that's something else I did know, that palm sanders are notorious for leaving little swirl marks. And because I was checking with the light, I couldn't see them, and I thought I was doing okay. I thought I was like, all right, well, you know, maybe my technique of the way I'm using the 2 different grits and yada, yada, yada was working. Well, it wasn't. The rule is no palm sanding, no orbital at all on this. At least small orbitals. So that bit me yet again. I really need to get either my Festool up and running again or an edger here to get into these edges. So this is 2 passes with the 120 on the drum, and you can still see some of the swirls left over in that palm sander. I'm gonna go ahead and lower it. I'm gonna go to 100 and see how that does. And if we have to go down to 80, we'll go down to 80. I don't think so though, but we'll see. After a whole lot of different combinations of the drum and the buffer and different grits and speed rates and all that, I finally have the right combination in order to get the color that I'm looking for. Because that was one of the biggest problems with what we did before, is the color was just too light. And it's somewhere in this genre here. The problems I have with these is that the ripple marks from the drum sander are just so pronounced. That's all I see are ripples. So I went over here and I have a tighter ripple pattern by changing just the grit. Now, the only challenge with that is that particular belt for the drum sander left little tiny ridges. I can hand sand those off, or I can buff them out. Again, problem with buffing is that it just brightens it up too much. So, I think the next course of action is just drum this whole room with the 120, and then we can check that and see how it goes. I'm gonna change the belt, see if I can get rid of those ridges. So this little mark that we're coming up onto right there, it's super important to keep the floor dry because you can get these little dots from the rain coming in the window or moisture coming off your shoes. And in this case, sweat rolling out from behind our knee pads. Oh yeah, that happened. Good morning. We have yet another variable to keep track of. The wheels on the edger, I've now noticed, also make little marks in the floor. But the most frustrating, that is the most recent thing. Oh, and if you have just a bit of a stain on your hand while you're staining, and you support your body with that hand, you'll get a handprint that you now have to sand out and re-stain. Unreal. So always have a rag underneath your support hand. That takes care of that. But the vacuum. If you've probably seen in the background, this vacuum just kind of rolling around, doing its thing up on these giant casters. That's because the little janky wheels that it comes with just leaves marks on the floor. Like that. Little black marks all over the floor. And I picked up on that almost immediately. That's why this carriage got built to support the vacuum. These are non-marring wall or non-marring wheels, and they roll over the top of all the cords and everything, and it makes it very nice and easy to use. Now, for the latest issue with the vacuum. The head has these little riding tabs, right? So it creates air gaps on the side, and then you have the leading edge here. But when you go and you apply this vacuum to the floor, this is a brand new vacuum, mind you, so it's got all of the power that it was supposed to have. It'll suck that head right to the floor. And when you're pulling back, it's no big deal. But when you push forward on that head, these little tabs rub against the floor. They don't leave a visible mark until you get eye level with it, with a light reflecting towards you, is the only time you see it. Well then, Sean, why is it a big deal? Well, let me show you what happens. That line right there. You can see the floor is a bit brighter over there versus right about here. And that is because that whole area there was hand sanded to take out that little vacuum mark. Because now we figured out how to identify those marks before staining. Now, I'm gonna have to go back into that room when I get the stain back out again and re-stain those brighter areas and try to blend it a little bit more. And that process does work. Re-staining after the fact doesn't tint it nearly as far as the initial tinting, or staining. So it's not, don't be scared of it, is what I'm trying to say. Just get in there, same procedure, wipe it off, and she'll darken up those areas. Just be selective on where you're putting that stain. You don't want to go across the entire floor, then you still have dark and light. I'm gonna come in here, we're in the main living space, and I want to do this half of that. So I'm gonna go through, we're gonna drum with 100, drum with 120, and then go through, do all the edging, and try staining this. I don't have Bentley today. Well, he might show up a little bit later. He wasn't feeling great this morning. Yesterday was supposed to be his very last day, and then his boss texted me again last night, said, hey, you can have Bentley again. Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. A couple more things I've learned about this machine is that the sanding media is on a continuous roll. So it slips over one side. So only one side is supported. So this side has more tendency to dig harder on the floor. So when you're moving across the room, have this side being your leading edge at all times. And that way when it leaves a little bit of a dinger, the less supported part of the drum will take that dinger right out. And the way you monitor that is by having a light. If you shine your light across the cut, then you'll see all the different elevations of the wood grain, and you'll see that dinger. If you don't have the light, you will not see it. Well, that took half the day, and I had lunch, and now I'm back at it. And now I have to do the whole thing again with 120 on the drum. I ended up changing paper once. Yeah, dealing with the details in the floor are very tricky because you don't want to cross-cut the grain when you're on finished sanding. We are relying so much on the location of the scratches that we're putting in the floor to obtain the color I'm looking for that it's tricky. That's all I can say. You really have to understand the location of the sandpaper in relationship to the machine that you can't see. So you have to identify those points from the outside of the machine and then correlate those points with the boards. So when you're intersecting anything that has the transverse boards to perpendicular, it's tricky. That's all I can say about that. The good news is that the floor just continuously gets flatter and flatter and flatter on every round of sanding. So the wheels on a vacuum, yeah, okay, knew that was coming. The head getting sucked to the floor causing a problem, did not see that one coming. And you know, all the other things, I'm even losing track of how many things affected these floors and the things I had to overcome. But sweat from behind the knee pad? Come on! Whew. I mean, I was getting close to my breaking point when that one came through. But all I could do was sit back and laugh once I figured it out. I mean, come on. Really? Well, I hope you guys are learning a bunch from these. And yeah, next week I'll pump out another video on the floor series. We should be in the poly by then. One would hope. All right, take care, and thank you for stopping by High Peaks Home.